Hey everyone, just again, I want to say a quick thank you to everyone in this community and especially to my Patreon supporters. As you guys know, we got laid off my government job about a month ago. A lot of government cuts going on right now. Through this time, I know there's other families that are having a hard time out there in this economy. Thank you. Just thank you so much. I don't take any of this for granted, and I truly appreciate everyone's love and support. If you guys would like to join us on Patreon, there's a link in the episode description so you can help kind of support the show. And thank you guys so much for everything. Enjoy the episode. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens, and today we're heading back to the Chesapeake Bay. This topic is definitely has a really big debate on so many levels. It is the Menhaden crisis. Crisis, I think, is the best way to put it, especially while we're recording this. I think Maryland put out something that we'll definitely talk here with this individual here, Brian Collins, who is a big time advocate for the Chesapeake Bay. Brian, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome, Thomas. Thank you for the invite.
So, as always, I do with my guests here, what got you into fishing, and have you been in the area your whole life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've been fishing all my life with my dad. We lived on the West Coast. We used to float fish and moved to Virginia when we were 12 and mostly fished the Virginia River, like the James River, Shenandoah River, Rappahannock, Ravenna, all the rivers. And then I got associated with the Eastern Shore of Virginia, got into flounder fishing on the Eastern Shore off the Barrier Islands there, and then also over in the Bay. Not as much, but so kind of pretty good taste of Virginia saltwater and freshwater fishing.
How has the Bay changed over your life?
One of my early memories of the Bay is going out trolling for bluefish with in-law. We took a ride down to the Bay and we got in his boat. It was his self-chartered, and I can't tell you how many bluefish we caught, but I always tell the story about in Charlottesville, my hometown, where everybody knew about bluefish because they were so abundant, and everybody would when I say everybody, a lot of people would joke, and trade recipes for bluefish because they're so oily, and how can you make them taste good? But Charlottesville, probably I'm going to say a 2.5-2 hour drive to the Bay, but bluefish were so plentiful back then that was a common charter fishing. And then it wasn't for a while later that I'll just share this anecdote, but I was familiar with Menhaden to the extent that my father was working for the Institute for Environmental Negotiations and had been called in to try and mediate that issue. Did a paper on it, but as I recall him saying, industry wasn't participating, so there wasn't really anywhere to go with it. But I became aware of Menhaden at that time, and then took a sailing trip out of Cape Charles, just a pleasure cruise on my own. And it wasn't long before we were out of Cape Charles Harbor when I came across one of the biggest schools. I think it's the biggest school of fish I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I was amazed. I had no idea even what it was. I mean, as far as your eye could see, in every direction were these fish popping on the surface of the water. And that was my first experience with Menhaden in the Bay.
How long did your dad do that for?
He was with the Institute. It was founded after there was a Keepone spill in the James River, and they used some of the lawsuit proceeds. I'm not sure I know all the details exactly, but it funded some advocacy groups. And so at the University of Virginia, they had a mediation program to help kind of focus in on a variety of issues, environmental issues affecting the state of Virginia and regionally.
And is the group, and this is the one way, guys, I find all my guests is also not only through word of mouth, people telling me who I need to get on in our community, but also like Facebook groups and things like that. And I believe I found you through the Menhaden Little Fish Big Deal Facebook group. Is that a group that you started, or were you one of the founding members?
No, I'm not. Debbie Campbell from the Eastern Shore was instrumental in starting it with some other folks. I think she was probably the lead on it, and it really started after a major Menhaden industrial fishing fish spill that occurred on the Eastern Shore of Virginia on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay. It's the western shore of the eastern shore of Virginia. But anyway, and there were a lot of big dead redfish in there.
Wow.
And I think it was traumatic to her. So she tried to raise awareness with that issue, because I think that's the main problem, if you want to call it that, for a proper discussion of the issue, is ignorance. So many people really don't understand menhaden. They're also called bunker. I think pogie maybe. They're also prevalent in the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, what do you want to call it? They're not edible. They're really oily. They happen to be like probably the most nutritious forage fish out there, full of omega-3 oils. And I think that's what attracts industry to it, because they can harvest that highly nutritious fish and feed it to fish farms or poultry farms, maybe cattle or supplements. But it's just so nutritious. It's a great natural resource in the state of Virginia. And so she wanted to raise awareness, and I kind of joined in, because I have to admit, I became, quite frustrated and, I guess you could say almost mad, angry with that. Almost all of the main players on the East Coast related to this issue were blaming recreational fishermen for the collapse of striped bass in the bay. We've lost that large bluefish population that was in the bay. They were, prize fighters. I didn't realize till later, after taking an offshore fishing trip that was tuna and dolphin, and we were catching bluefish, and I realized, wow, bluefish, really, that's a scrapper. I mean, it fights harder than any striped bass. I mean, a striped bass has a pretty good fight, but then, after a while, it kind of tires out. But a bluefish is kind of like a tuna. So I said, wow, we really lost a tremendous resource there. But so, yeah, that made me kind of get in there, because I'm like, look, and I started digging into it. And there's a lot of other experts that I have been learning from. So I'm mostly borrowed knowledge, if you want to call it that, information. But, when we're taking, they're taking 112 million pounds of menhaden out of the bay every year. It's a historical quota without any science. Wow. It's basically, this is what you caught last year. This is what you can catch next year. And that quota has been decreasing as the ecosystem has shown signs of failure. And that industry has a quota established by the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries Commission of 230 million more pounds that can be caught all the way up to the mouth of the bay at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. Just outside the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel is technically called the ocean, for the ocean quota. Virginia is the only state on the East Coast that allows industrial fishing to occur within 3 miles of the state waters. So that's a heavily fished area, the barrier islands of Virginia and the mouth of the bay. So some folks have really pushed for getting industry to regulate their bay catch, but even if they didn't have their bay quota, they could almost sit at the mouth of the bay and cut off the flow of menhaden in and out of the bay.
How long has this been going on for, and what groups are involved?
Well, there's a long history, and like the industry folks will say, we've been doing this for 100 years or more, and I don't know all the history, but I know that there used to be a lot of menhaden fishing all up and down the coast, but the fishery has condensed all the way down to one big industrial reduction fishing plant in Reedville, Virginia, and they call it reduction fishing because the process, this might not be exactly right, but basically they reduce the fish down into a meal that can be then used for various products. So it's it's been around for a long time, and it's called the most important fish in the sea because I think of its nutritional component, and it's also the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries and the National Oceanographic Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, they measure the fishery, and they claim, and I don't really have any reason to doubt it, a vast abundance of fish in the ocean. Menhaden, I think I've heard industry say they catch 0.5% of what's been measured. I'm not sure if they quote that for just the East Coast or wherever. But the key difference, though, when they say that, is that the ocean is a separate ecosystem from the Chesapeake Bay. So when conflate the abundance in the ocean with the bay, that's kind of more than just a little misleading. The Chesapeake Bay is the nursery for at one point, different people have used different percentages, and of course, as the striped bass population continues to decline, the percentages probably vary. But there's times when people said 90% of East Coast striped bass originated in the Chesapeake Bay. And University of Maryland Eastern Shore has done studies of tagging and showing that striped bass live in the bay about 10 years until they're about 32 inches long. I don't know what the weight would normally be before they leave the bay and head to the ocean. So it's really a nursery where these fish stay for a long time. But just this past week at the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries, the bait fishery industry in Maryland reported to the panel studying menhaden that they were unable to catch any menhaden in Maryland. So that means that of all the menhaden that come into the Chesapeake Bay, they have to first pass through Virginia's industrial fishing gauntlet to make it to Maryland. And there's every reason to believe that industry removes every menhaden school that they find in the Chesapeake Bay. There is nothing left for the predators in the ecosystem, the osprey that live in, depend on menhaden in higher salinity waters. This is more, I'm not going to say controversial, but, blue crabs are at all-time lows. People say, well, how do you figure blue crabs? But blue crabs live off detritus, dead fish. When you had 112 million pounds of fish, let's say they were all alive and let go, even if you lost 1% only, and they're really have a high natural mortality, menhaden do for whatever reason, they have big die-offs. Even if it was only 1%, you got 1 million pounds of dead fish that crabs could eat. But also what happens is even if they didn't die off, those schools of menhaden are attacked by predator fish and by birds and create debris fields with food just dropping down into the bottom of the water for crabs to eat. I mean, if you go and ask a crabber, I think most of them, if not all of them, would say the best crab bait is menhaden. That's what they put in their crab pots because crabs, they can't say no.
How, if you had to guess, how many or how much poundage do you think of menhaden actually live in the Chesapeake Bay in a perfect world?
Well, see, that's a good question because I was just thinking about this the other day that, I think our scientists do a pretty good job of counting the prevalence. Like I mentioned, blue crabs, they kind of know how many blue crabs we have. They count the striped bass. They have surveys and they check it. They know how many are caught. We know how many osprey are there. We keep track of red drum. We keep track of cobia, speckled trout, croaker, spot, eels maybe. We count everything, but nobody counts menhaden in the bay. Nobody counts it. So there's nobody that knows how many are in the bay. It's a historical quota. It's not based on any science. So it's kind of crazy. It's like, how did you decide to give 112 million pounds of quota to take out of the bay and you don't even know how many are there? I mean, it's ridiculous. But what some people, say is, well, I think what the biggest, I don't know if you want to call it a problem, but misinformation is this idea that somehow the ocean supply, and I mentioned this before, but ocean ecosystem and the supply of menhaden there equate to a healthy fishery in the bay. But the fishery in the bay is a much different ecosystem. And you have, like I mentioned, striped bass that depend on those fish to grow strong and to be abundant. And then you get into a whole nother issue, which is, all right, well, like those bait fishermen in Maryland that says they're not catching any fish, or one of them said we caught 5, it's kind of like a joke. we caught 5 bait fish. Is none of the striped bass living in Maryland are getting any food. The bait fishermen aren't. I mean, they're a surface schooling fish that you can spot with airplanes. They're sea. So we're starving the ecosystem. So all of those predators all have to start eating something different, right? What's happening? We don't have that. We don't have the science on Menhaden, and it's to the advantage of industry not to have science, because if we knew more, we'd have a better debate. I mean, if you go like this, just today, well, it was last week actually, the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries continued to discuss how to save the striped bass population. And when they list all the things that are problematic for striped bass, they'll say blue catfish, maybe they'll say recreational fishing is the biggest culprit, maybe commercial fishing, maybe it's climate change, maybe it's pollution. There's a whole list, but what's never on that list is removing the favorite food of striped bass, which is Menhaden bunker, because it's highly nutritious, it's full of omega-3 oils, but it's not even on the list. And I argue, and I'll say it, I've said it before, it's like if you were in elementary school and people were asked why might the a population of a species collapse, and I'd say the first thing that they say is, well, what's going on with the food supply? Is there enough food for them? I mean, that would be the first thing you'd ask. It's not even being asked in Virginia by CBF, by BSSA, by TRCP. We know there's a problem, but it's not making the list, and it's crazy. It doesn't make any sense. It's frustrating. And so back to Debbie Campbell and the Facebook page is, we're trying to raise awareness, and the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries sets these quotas. But Virginia, the VMRC, Virginia Marine Resources Commission, and the state of Virginia have the authority to reject the quotas that are set by the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries Commission. However, the quotas for Virginia are rubber stamped identical to what the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries Commission establishes as the official formal quota that they accept. And Virginia Marine Resources Commission is accepting that quota without any science to confirm that that's a sensible, sustainable, reasonable way to manage the fishery.
So for people that don't know, the Chesapeake Bay is, again, spoiler, is very big, and it's separated by the Virginia and Maryland. When we talk about, let's say, the Virginia's portion, if they pass regulation, would that affect the whole bay or just their portion? Like, how does that work with the fight between Maryland and Virginia and the whole Chesapeake Bay?
That's a good question. I mean, the bay is, let's just keep out the ocean quota and the migration in and out of Menhaden, because they are a migratory fish. They don't stay year round in the bay. I mean, they do, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in the biology, but they basically come in and grow a little bit and leave, not in a very long time. I mean, they have their larvae in the ocean where they spawn, and it flows into the bay, and they grow bigger. But the bay is 50% Virginia, 50% Maryland, almost exactly. Wow. Very close. And Maryland is the northern reaches of the bay. The industrial fishing for Virginia can only occur in the lower half of the Chesapeake Bay that's Virginia. So like I've heard people say, the industrial fishing boats will sit right on the border with Maryland, because it's almost like an escape for freedom. If you can get across the Maryland line, if you're a Menhaden, I mean, you can make it free from the industry. You got other challenges once you get across there. But so right now, Virginia can cut off Maryland's flow of Menhaden 100%, and that's what they're doing. It hasn't been much of a controversy for some reason, where Maryland doesn't seem to be very outspoken about it. It's peculiar to me. However, Maryland banned industrial fishing of Menhaden in the 1950s, and Maryland has a law that bans industrial fishing off the coast of Maryland. You have to be 3 miles offshore. So Maryland's totally at the mercy of Virginia's management of that fishery.
So So, what you're just to make sure I heard this correctly. So, Maryland is a little lackluster compared to Virginia, trying to protect the Menhaden, or is it vice versa?
I would say Virginia is lackluster in the sense that they've almost seemed beholden to industry to give them everything they want,
Gotcha.
and there's no discussion of the possibility that they're being overfished, despite seeing osprey dying in high salinity areas to record amounts, and to seeing continual declines in striped bass. And I mentioned bluefish before, and so but Maryland, I think it's, I don't have a good answer for what explains why Maryland would sit by passively as Virginia removes all of the forage fish that feed the blue crabs and everything that are important to Maryland. It doesn't really make sense, but I think we know that industry is a powerful industrial special interest that has influence in the halls of Congress and in the state legislatures, in the governor's house. It's pretty well known. And so when you hear mute voices or don't hear these voices, you kind of almost have to say, well, there's a special interest that's somehow behind the scenes pulling the strings.
Who's making money off this? Like whose pocket is getting lined that still allows this to keep happening? If you had to put your tinfoil hat on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no doubt that Omega Industry is a multi-billion-dollar company. They call their fishing operation Ocean Harvesters, and I believe Omega is the name for the processing operation. And they are the ones that are taking the Menhaden, this highly nutritious forage fish, and creating a market to feed fish farms that they already own or sell it to other people. And so they would be the primary benefactors. I think that's fairly obvious. So otherwise, it's they're not paying a cent for removing probably one of the most valuable natural resources in the state of Virginia. I mean, the Chesapeake Bay is one of the most, or was at one time, everything's declined a little over time, I guess you'd say, but probably one of the most rich estuaries in the United States, maybe even in the world, for its biological diversity. And right now, fishermen are basically saying they can't see and find any Menhaden pods, which are indicators of where schools of fish are. It's almost like the bay's lifeless. We've lost thousands of jobs for charter fishermen. I mean, who wants to pay $1,200, $1,500 to go out charter fishing, and you really have a hard time catching fish? And if you do catch them, you can only keep one, and they're maybe not even as robust and big like they used to be.
You think there's a big link then between the decrease in the striper and the bluefish with the Menhaden? And then we haven't even talked about like the blue cats, and like, is that having an effect on the Menhaden numbers as well? Like it's crazy the spot the Chesapeake Bay is in right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. It's kind of crazy because like blue catfish, I don't think there's any doubt that they're causing damage. I mean, we're not studying the issue. We're not, we're not even studying industrial fishing. There's more discussion about the damage that blue catfish are causing to the bay ecosystem than there is of the discussion of the damage that industrial Menhaden fishing is doing. So yeah, there could be a lot. I mean, Virginia and the VMRC rejected what I thought was a very reasonable effort to let's try and remove all these giant blue catfish. And the governor of Virginia vetoed a law that would have allowed people to keep all their large blue catfish, instead saying we're going to only let you keep 132-inch blue catfish because we want the rest of them in there to reward the sport fishing industry. So it's kind of like crazy, what? I mean, you figure you and I would probably agree. I'm not pretending to be a scientist on this one, but a bigger, giant blue catfish probably does more damage than a little one. And that's the one we're preserving. When I say we, Virginia.
It's crazy. And you guys know that I'm on the Virginia board for for freshwater, for black bass. And I know like for the tidal Potomac, there's 3 organizations that run the tidal Potomac, which is bonkers because, you know, Virginia shares a border with it. And they talk about if you want to pass any regulation to help bass, it's a nightmare because you have to get through like 3 things of tape. And it's like, how the hell does anything get passed with so much bureaucracy?
Yeah, I mean, I know there was a petition to put a creel limit on hickory shad that went down in flames, and it's like, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the shad fishery in the Potomac River.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people. When I say a lot, you know, numerous folks that target striped bass that chase up the river, the herring and the shad, and they migrate up. And that fishery coming up the river is hurting as well. So yeah, there's some strange things happening. I mean, it could be it's bureaucratic, but it just seems like we've lost our way on preserving the fisheries and our ecosystems.
Where do you think this goes? Like, where does this end? I know there was I believe I saw the alert on your guys' Facebook, but like there's big announcement about the Menhaden issue, that there's an alarm being raised. It seems like it's getting good attention, hopefully from the media right now, but what does that do if nothing changes, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. I mean, that's $1 million question in a way. I mean, there was a bill this past legislative session in Virginia, and it was a repeat from the prior year on a study that was developed by VIMS with partnerships with CBF, and industry was in there, and sport fishing was in that room. But when you look closely at it, it was deeply flawed because it allowed 4 more years of unconstrained industrial fishing in the bay. I mean, I think most people who follow it really are worried the bay is on its last legs, that the ecosystem is in serious danger. It just doesn't have the vitality. It's showing signs of dying, like, you know, however you decide that to use that word. You know, and that legislation only focused on the bay. It ignored the ocean quota. So as we look more and more at it, and I think Debbie Campbell's been doing a great job of leading this, is to say, let's move them 3 miles offshore, just like every other state on the East Coast. And, you know, sometimes you'll hear some howling from industry and maybe other supporters that's bad for the industry and they won't be able to survive. However, 3 miles offshore, I mean, 3 miles, that's a small little commute. It's also where Atlantic State Marine Fisheries and National Oceanographic Ocean Administration is saying that's where all the fish are. They can stay in business. But what we can do is if they go 3 miles offshore, that opens the gateway for menhaden who like to migrate up and down the coast to have a safe access into the bay, in and out of the bay. And a lot of people forget about the barrier islands. It's a UNESCO World Heritage region area where there's a lot of migrating seabirds, and it's like a transitional ecosystem between the land and the ocean. And the industry is fishing all along inshore in Virginia, and I think it's damaging our fishery. And so we're going to get a new governor. We don't know who yet, and we're going to have a new legislature in 2020. I guess I'm not sure when they take office. I guess it's in January. The election's in November. But those political appointees at the MRC, there are going to be some changes there, likely, right? And then the new governor and the new legislature, hopefully they come on board and support. Let's move this fishery 3 miles offshore. It allows industrial menhaden fishing to be a viable business enterprise, and we can allow the ecosystem and the fishery to start to recover and bring back these jobs that are driven by recreational fishing, where people stay in hotels, they buy gas, they buy gear, and we should have people traveling all over the world. But let's just say the United States or even surrounding states, they should be coming to the bay. Right now, there's no reason to go to the bay for fishing. I mean, if you live nearby, I mean, even like if you got bay property right now, even your property values are suffering because it's like, it's like I'm next to this big pond that doesn't have any life. I mean, I'm being a little harsh. It's not like it's dead, not like there isn't a lot going on, but I'm saying that it's nowhere near its potential. And so I think that That's where we need to go. Move them 3 miles offshore, just like everywhere else. They can be a viable entity. We can allow the Menhaden to start to move back into the bay and feed the wildlife, feed the osprey, feed the striped bass, provide food for the crabs. Let's rebuild it and restore, the ecosystem.
Mm. Now, something has to be done about this. It does. And at least the start is bringing public awareness so we can start bringing people accountable to the actions. Because when you're dealing with a billion-dollar industry, whether it's Omega or big pharma, and Lord knows with the opium epidemic and everything else that's happened, that's a hard beast to try to knock down, because you're going up against something that has the resources, that has the politicians in their back pocket, so they can kind of just do whatever they want. So it's going to take all of us to try to bring awareness to it and get something to happen.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I appreciate your reaching out to our Menhaden group on Facebook to look for somebody to talk with you about it, and your podcast to raise awareness. And that's really, I kind of repeat, to repeat myself, I think that's what we need to do is when Menhaden comes up, like you go to your average man on the street, woman on the street, wherever you are, and you bring up Menhaden, people will give you this quizzical look. So I don't know. What are you talking about? I mean, it's not anything that anybody ever eats. It never makes its way to a seafood counter or a seafood restaurant menu. Nobody knows about it. And everybody needs to know about it because of how important it is. I mean, this surface schooling fish, they take airplanes, they spot them from the air, they direct industrial fishing nets to circle them, and they take every one of them that comes into the bay right outside, where their headquarters is. Okay, yeah, if I was industry, I'd like to fish in my front porch too, right out in my front yard. I understand that. That's profitable. You got less everything, right? Less gas, less time, and so forth. Move a little bit further out. I mean, they'll travel, 100 miles up the coast looking for Menhaden. We're talking about, hey, go offshore 3 miles. You can make your business viable out there, and we can save a lot more jobs and have a lot more economic activity helping everybody if we could work that out.
If people want to get involved and help, is there anything that people can do or things I can link in the episode description?
That's a good question. I mean, the best thing we have right now, and I would admit and agree, it's pretty limited. I mean, we have a group where you can ask for membership to Menhaden Little Fish Big Deal, and join, and you can follow the dialogue there. After that, I think just trying to do what you can to dig into it. I mean, I like to follow all of the reports on the bay, but some of these I'll put it this way: it's difficult to get good straight scoop information. Like if I'm interested in learning about why are striped bass collapsed, if I went to Chat GPT or something like that, AI, I'm not sure what it would say. I should look that up. But when I read every article, like the American Sport Fishing Association, I believe that's their name, they had a story about striped bass, and they're saying, we've had a 44% decline in striped bass since over the last 7 years. And now and this was the commercial fishermen were complaining that, hey, you're gonna decrease my quota, my take again. I'm not happy about that. And I know I mentioned this before, but they list all the things that are causing problems, but not one word about industrial fishing of Menhaden that's taken the most valuable food. And when I say the most valuable food, Atlantic State Marine Fisheries Commission, to help address the Menhaden discussion, identified 4 species that were most connected to striped bass, and that were most dependent on Menhaden. It was striped bass, osprey, bluefish, and weakfish. There might be another weakfish being gray trout.
Oh, okay.
So you call them ecological reference points, and that was in a design to be kind of not a canary in the coal mine, but like, hey, look, if we see problems in osprey, we see problems in striped bass, we see problems with bluefish or whatever, that might mean that we have a problem with Menhaden. So that sounds all good, right? It sounds like it makes sense. I think it is probably a pretty good reference point. the conundrum and the thing that fools even the people who study it a lot is that the ERP, the ecological reference points, don't apply to the bay. There are no measures that say, let's track to see how the ospreys are doing in the bay, because that might tell us if we got a Menhaden problem. Let's see how the striped bass are doing, because that could be a good clue. What about the bluefish? Let's do that. What about the gray trout? All of those species are almost gone. And not gone, but they're like a shadow of what they used to be. Now, osprey gets twisted because industry is powerful. They have a big megaphone voice, and they can confuse things. They'll say, hey, the osprey in the Chesapeake Bay are strong and they're doing fine. And that's true. We're not talking about adult ospreys. I mean, I might even misled some people who listen and heard what I said so far. What it is it's the chicks that the osprey raise that live in higher salinity areas of the bay that are highly dependent on Menhaden as the primary source of food. Those chicks are dying. They're starving to death because the osprey cannot find Menhaden to feed them. So when industry says, hey, we don't have an osprey problem, there's plenty of them, whatever, or they'll say there's a lot of osprey up this river. Yeah, okay, up the river isn't the high salinity area where they're dependent on Menhaden. So there's a lot of misinformation. It's hard to wade through. So your question is a good one. We need to, and it's not like we're ignorant of it, but we need more outlets for this information and trying to share with as many people as we can about what's happening in the ecosystem.
The osprey thing is going to be, I got to get somebody else to talk about that, because I had on Dave Miller talk about Connecticut, where herbicide spraying in lakes and the Delaware River, they believe has a correlation with bird kills and bad hatches. And it's reminding me of the bald eagle issue we had in the early 90s, or I think it was even earlier, where pesticides caused like them to almost go extinct. And it's like, is history repeating again? Just a little different now? Is that what we're doing? It's like, we just can't learn, which is crazy. But Brian, I really appreciate you coming on today. Guys, as always, link in the episode description to everything we talked about. I'm going to be putting in the episode description a link to the Menhaden Big Fish. Let me make sure I get that title right here. The Menhaden group on Facebook. I'm going to be linking that in the episode description. Please go check them out.
Well, Thomas, thank you very much for the opportunity to share some information. Very good questions, and appreciate what you're doing as a Virginian to keep eyes open for both our freshwater and saltwater fishing. We've got a great fishery in the state of Virginia we need to take care of.
Absolutely. And guys, I will see you next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.